All right, we are live. Hello and welcome, Just a Family, to giving you something to talk about live TV. Today's episode is Children's Mental Health with my guest co-host, Dr. Mishra. And I'm super excited to be talking to him about children's mental health and how we as parents can facilitate our children growing their emotions, their being able to express their emotions and learning coping skills, and how we can help ourselves help them, and really just advocating for our children's mental health. Our episode today is sponsored by none other than me. I'm sponsoring today's episode. I have a deep-seated love and passion for children's mental health and creating a healthy, happy identity for our children, because I don't think enough children these days have healthy coping skills and healthy mechanisms. And as we get further into the show, I will explain why this is such a passion topic for me. If you would like to be a guest host or a guest blogger or sponsor an episode, please reach out to me at www.justalivetv.com. And for anybody watching and catching the replay, watching or listening, please go and like us on your own social media accounts, sign up for the newsletter, and find out when we go live and what's upcoming. So thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing today? How about you introduce yourself to our viewers?
That'll be great. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here today. My name is Dr. Gaurav Mishra. I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. I'm based in San Diego. Part of my work every day is working with kids, families, and adults. That's about 50% of my time. The other 50% of my time is I oversee a behavioral health department at a federally qualified health center. That's a federally funded and state-funded organization in southern San Diego County, where we are very close to the US-Mexico border, and we serve a lot of underserved population in South and East San Diego County. So I oversee the department. I oversee several psychiatrists, therapists, case managers, and also work on expanding the services available to the to our population in the region, integrating with primary care, so a lot of different things. It's teaching. We have medical students and residents to rotate with us, so those are also exciting parts of my job every day.
So why did you get into children's psychiatry? What drew you to that? Why is that a passion of yours?
I think so. I had not. I was doing my residency in general and adult psychiatry in Detroit, Michigan, at Wayne State University, where I was working in the inner city population with inner city populations in their hospitals there, in my outpatient, and also in the VA where I trained there. And I had initially decided to work in the field of addiction psychiatry, and then I was in one of my psychiatrist as a resident, and this was in an inpatient hospital for kids with severe mental illness in near Detroit. And I think it was an amazing experience, because I think I worked with a lot of kids who had experienced significant amount of trauma in their life or had severe illness, but I also saw that working with them really gave them a good chance of doing better. And it really was, I would say, as a physician who's potentially, going there to try to see if you can do something and make something better for people who are coming to you for help. It was very a positive experience for me as a young doctor to work on. So I think that got me really inspired and motivated. And I was just there for 60 days, I would say, in my rotation out of the 3 years of rotation, and that just switched my interest to child psychiatry. And at that point, I decided that, okay, that's what I want to do next. And I went on to do my child psychiatry fellowship in Washington, D.C. at Children's National Medical Center, which was, again, an exciting place to be. Very, very nice organization, and the hospital. Also, people who work with kids are nicer. I would say that, I found if you work in a children's hospital, just see everybody's a little more positive, everybody's a little more hopeful, and I think it's a very nice place to work in. I think that also motivated me a little bit, because it was good to go to work there.
Absolutely. I apologize if anybody in the background can hear my daughter screaming. She's on her own little meeting with her I can't, I say boyfriend because that's her little boyfriend, but they're on a meeting and she tends to scream and giggle quite a bit. So I apologize in advance if you hear that in the background. I find it is, you look at anywhere you go where you've experienced somebody dealing with children's issues, it's a different mentality. It's a different projection, because working with kids, our instinct is to make them happier, to make them feel more positive, more bright, make their days feel better. And working in the healthcare system is even more especially so, because they're scared. They're uncertain. They don't have clarity. They don't know necessarily what's going on or what to do. So they're looking to adults to say, hey, it's going to be okay, right? We're smiling. Everything's going to be fine. Right. So the mentality behind that. Now, working as a psychiatrist and working with children, do you find that that's harder on you or more emotionally draining on you because it's children rather than adults or, adolescents?
I'll tell you, I know that I have a lot of colleagues who at times find it harder, but I think I enjoy it, because I actually enjoy the part of working with the families and the parents and the guardian to really make sure that any intervention that I may feel is needed is actually being done in a positive and healing way at home also. So I really enjoy that piece of bringing the stakeholders together to really help the child do well. Because, kids are lucky in a way. In some ways, they're lucky that there are other things that they don't have like an adult. Like may not always have a voice. They may not feel like they have a voice, but they are lucky in a way. In many cases, we find they have at least one person who's in their corner. It may be a teacher, it may be a parent, a grandparent, even if some situations it may be a foster care worker, social worker, somebody who's in their corner who you can appeal to make sure things start getting better. So I think that is very, I find that like good, because then I can, as my role, I feel like I'm also a natural bridge builder. So building those bridges and helping create that support system for the child, I feel is something I really enjoy doing. So that way, I have not felt the burden of the working with kids in that way. But I will say that, I have 2 boys of my own now. And a couple of days ago, my wife told me, he's going to develop emotional dysregulation if you do this, if you don't calm him down in a certain way. So even as a child psychiatrist, it doesn't give me all the skills I need to be a parent. So I do understand the struggle of parents and guardians a lot better since I've had my own kids. And I think, it's important for them to be in the picture of, care.
There is definitely a difference between real world knowledge and experiencing things yourself versus medical knowledge or learned knowledge. There is a huge difference in there. So we did the pre-screening interview and it was amazing. I loved the things that we talked about. And one of those things was really just supporting and advocating for children. Do you think that's the number one thing we as parents or guardians or foster parents or whatever role, teacher, friend, what is the number one thing we need to know or we need to learn to help these children with the coping skills and the emotional and mental health that they're facing?
So I think even before I say what we need for the kids, I feel that we need to look at ourselves, because I'll tell you, even in more than 50% of the patients' kids I see, and majority of the parent who brings the child in happen to be moms, and more than 50% of the times I'm working with a family, I do see very clearly that a mom, in some cases dad, has their own mental health struggles, which they've ignored for many years. And I can understand that, moms are feeling that, okay, they have to put their needs aside to make sure they are fully addressing what is needed for the kid, because there's so much to be done. But I think this is part of my advocacy when I work with families, is that, a kid, even if it's a 16-year-old, a kid is not a fully functional adult yet, so they are in a way, they are a part of a system in which you as a parent or caregiver is part of that system. So they are a whole person in some ways, along with you. And if you are yourself struggling with so many different things, it is a lot harder to really address their needs. So I do think that if parents find that they are struggling and they feel, and I think it's not a wrong feeling, but it's just a natural feeling to have, I need to forget about what I'm dealing with to take care of this. Obviously, urgent needs are different. Food and those things are different. But I think you have to make sure you're taking care of yourself. I think that's the first place it starts.
How many parents do you feel like a lot of parents will sacrifice their own mental health and their own stability to provide that for their children? I've heard a lot of it. I said it yesterday in the show that I did yesterday, is I'm my number one. I have 3.5 children, and I say a half because I have a bonus, but I have 3 children. I am number one. I will give and do anything for my children. I love them dearly, but I'm my number one, because if I'm not okay and I'm not taking care of me, how am I supposed to do that with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very important message you send out there, because I think that's not the common experience for most people. I think most, I would say, especially mothers, I would say, are ignoring their own mental health, even physical health needs, and sometimes they're ignoring them for years. I have patients who are in their 50s and 60s who have been struggling with anxiety for 30 years, and they've raised their kids and they've never addressed it. So I think there are definitely, I would say, over 50% of my patients, I see there's some concern. Sometimes I'm happy to hear that they are addressing their own needs, but very often I need to get them connected, let them know we have services for adults. Can I connect you? And many times they'll be hesitant. Many parents tell me, I don't think I have the time for that. And we have to really emphasize that they have to make the time for it, because it is directly related to how well they can help their kid also.
Yeah. One of the things I've seen in my own experiences and through friends and my own coaching practice, and I can say that because I'm sponsoring this episode. In my own coaching practice, I've seen mothers, specifically mothers, in my situation, and the same can be said for fathers. I've seen mothers who have literally said, I am only alive because of my children. I have seen mothers where I've asked, do you cry in front of them? And they're like, no. And I said, why not? Why don't you cry in front of your children? Your children need to know that it's okay to feel anger, to feel sadness, to cry, to express those emotions. And if we're not teaching them how to do that in a healthy way,
Right.
How are they supposed to learn?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right there, because firstly, the kids are a lot more perceptive than we give them credit for. They see and hear and think a lot more. Especially for younger kids, what happens is that for younger kids, their world revolves around them, right? So they think they are the center of this world and everything is happening because of them, positive and negative. So if they're seeing something negative, they attribute it to themselves doing something wrong. They see something positive. So if we are hiding our emotions, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not perceiving something is wrong. They just don't have words to clearly understand what it is. They are not an adult to understand what you as an adult may be going through. So they are just attributing it to things, whatever makes sense to them. Okay, am I being bad today? That's why this person is struggling, or whatever it may be.
I challenge all of our viewers and anybody listening to this. I challenge you to ask yourself, if you're a parent and you've had a child and you've raised that child from a baby, I want you to go back to when they were a baby. If you were stressed because they were crying, if you were having issues because they weren't sleeping, your children felt that. Even as infants, your children will feel your emotions. They are naturally empathetic. They feel your emotions. So you think about that then. At that point, they're feeling that doesn't change. So if you're hiding your emotions as you get older, or as they get older, then children, everybody tells me, and this I want to question you on, because you are the psychiatrist. I want to question you on this. I've had people come up to me and tell me that children have it easy. I've even said it to my kids. Children have it easy. I don't believe that. I believe children have it just as bad, if not worse, as adults, because they're trying to figure out who they are. they're trying to maneuver through life, and everything that goes on in their life, like you said, is singular to them. If mom and dad are fighting, or your parents are fighting, oh, that's on me. So I did something wrong. If my husband and I, we fight, we're healthy, we fight, right? We get into arguments.
Right.
First thing my youngest does is she runs in the room and she says, stop doing that. You're not allowed to do that. And she'll get involved.
Right.
And if we don't stop, she'll cry. And that's her, it upsets her to see that. But we tell her it's okay. Mom and dad are having an argument. We will work through it. And we teach her that it's okay to have that back and forth and be allowed to process what's going on or what the situation is.
Right. I mean, I would say for the second part, what you said, I think it is okay for the kids to see that adults argue and then they are back to normal of being loving to each other. That means two people can have disagreements, but can also resolve it and be happy, later. Same thing, if you're crying, that doesn't mean it's wrong to cry. It's okay to cry, but then you recover and then you carry on with your day like you're supposed to. If you're happy, that's great to see. If, whatever kind of distress you're in, if you're upset, I think all of these are different opportunities to be able to model to our kids, how do you deal with these real emotions that all of them for sure are going to deal with. Every one of us is going to deal with all of these different kind of difficult emotions. How do you, deal with it in a healthy way? Do you have depression and crying and ignore it for years and not get help for it? That's also a lesson, an unsaid lesson, but it's a lesson too. I think I tell parents all the time that if you take care of yourself, if you have depression and if you ignore it, you're going to be not happy for a long time. Versus if you have depression and now you go to a therapist or a psychiatrist, get treatment for it and do get better, that's a different message to your child that there are problems, but there are solutions too. Versus if you don't ever address it, there's only problems. And to them, it may seem maybe there's no solution. The child may think, okay, I saw my dad and mom go through a depression for many years. I'm 16, I'm feeling depressed for the last 2 years. I guess there's no solution, So I think because it was not corrected. So I think when you get help for yourself as an adult or a parent, I think that's a very strong message that one, you can get better. Second, you need to advocate for yourself to get better. Those are really strong messages. I think kids get. And I think you said that, do they have it easy? I think sometimes, I don't think they have it easy. I think we see it from an adult lens. So I think a kid may say something that I'm very anxious because I'm going to fail this test, right? And you think, okay, this kid is smart. They're not going to fail the test. I know this, but you are analyzing it from an adult, very logical person's perspective. But I mean, the child's emotional development is not that at your level. And I think in some cases it is actually better than your level, but I think generally speaking, not. So I think you have to, whatever they're expressing is very real for them. And if they feel I feel like I'm going to die, I feel like I'm scared, whatever, I think you may assess it very logically, but I think the emotional content needs to be paid attention to and to be taken seriously. Yeah.
Not only that, they're very momentary. They're not thinking long term, right? A child who thinks, oh, I'm going to fail this test isn't thinking, I have more time to study. They're not thinking, oh, if I fail this test, I can, really study hard and do the next test. They're not thinking that way. They're thinking specifically in that moment and not all the possibilities around every other moment.
I've had so many kids tell me, mom would bring them in that this kid, he'd had this major tantrum or bad behavior last week. And tell me, when? I mean, talking about last week, I've already moved on from there. You don't talk about, they're very upset that I'm talking about something that happened last week, because to them, that is a huge amount of time and they've made a lot of progress, So I think, to kids are also seeing timelines in very different ways, I think than adults see them. So definitely that has an impact also.
Yeah. So coping skills, coping skills is a big one for me. And the reason is because one of my children didn't learn coping skills. I wasn't where I am today. I wasn't an identity coach. I wasn't a spiritual teacher. I didn't have the understanding or practice the understanding that I have now. I always had it. I wasn't putting it into my own life. And I didn't teach this child to cope with the emotions that would come up. It was, we were in a situation where they would have to smother those emotions, or they would refuse to talk about them. And in order to process those emotions, my child ended up cutting. And I had a lot of people come to me and say, oh, it's just for attention. It's just for attention. And I did a lot of research on cutting when it happened. And it wasn't. It's the need to replace or remove an emotion. It's a focal point that allows them to take their mind off the emotion that they're feeling, that they don't know how to process, they don't know how to change, they don't know how to cope with. And it made me realize, and eventually I'd like to create a program for children, you know, pre-teen to teens, that teaches them how to, one, identify who they are, what their beliefs are, not their parents, not their peers, not their teachers, but their beliefs, as well as create their own coping tools. How do you cope? Not how I cope. I might cope by driving in my car with my music blaring, and that's my happy place. My oldest has taken that for me, and that's him create that level. But at the same time, what works for you isn't necessarily going to work for me. So it's helping children find their uniqueness, and that's where that's my passion. And that's why I wanted to, in the middle of this video, say that, because I'm sponsoring this episode because that is my passion. My children, or my child, has experienced self-harm because they didn't know how to cope. So it is a huge topic of mine, something that I fight with for children all over the world. You need to be teaching your children, one, that they are allowed to be who they want to be, two, that they are capable of showing emotion, even if they're mad at you. Man, when my kid's mad at me, I'm just like, you can be mad at me, but I need you to go to your room so that you and I don't do anything we're going to regret. Go to your room, go outside, go for a walk, whatever you need to do, and work through your emotion, whether that's through writing, whether that's through reading, listening to music, exercise, however you feel comfortable. So what do you think are good coping skills for children?
Yeah, I think, like, firstly, I definitely want to say that I don't think the cutting kids, when kids have cutting behaviors, they're not really just for attention. You know, I think it's a, what we say, we call it, it's a negative coping skill. It's a coping skill. It's a negative coping skill, or it's a coping skill in which you're doing more harm to yourself than helping yourself. But it is still a coping skill which is helping, or you're finding the best way you can to get out of this really strong, sad or negative feeling that you're having. You know, and I think that's what we see as the most common cause for kids telling you that why they do this, you know. And I think, again, I think coping skill discussion is important because culturally, I don't think it is taught to us. You know, it's not, and it is not necessarily, it's not necessarily a tool that humans have all the time. It's a tool humans develop either out of necessity or when they are taught, like, early. You know, so I think it is important for everybody to actively work on this. Now, as a parent, there may be times that we ourselves are struggling so much that we may not be the best role model for teaching that coping skill to the child. You know, so I think in that situation, it's completely fair to seek help. You know, and help could be in the form of a teacher, could be a school counselor, could be a therapist if needed. You know,
you or I.
Absolutely. So I think there's definitely. I think it is helpful to actively first recognize your emotions. You know, a lot of our kids cannot tell you if they're happy or sad. They'll ask you, what do you mean? And, you know, and so they don't not always know what that word means, you know. So I think that would be helpful. I think coping skills, I think you're absolutely right. Also, not one thing works for everybody. You know, deep breathing doesn't work for everybody. It's a great tool. It works for many people. And you don't even have to believe in it for it to work if you actually do it. But I think there are many tools that you need to develop. And I think the message is working with your child to find what helps them calm down, what helps de-escalate a situation. And, I think until like my older 5-year-old, sometimes he gets really irritated with me, and and like if I'm teasing him, whatever, we're just playing around, and he's upset at me, and I keep telling him to calm down, and obviously that doesn't work. I tell him, okay, you need to take a few minutes, and he took a few minutes, and actually I was very surprised because he was able to calm himself down and like just take a few minutes and not be next to me.
Self-soothing.
Right. And like I'm trying to force the calming, which is not going to happen, right? So I think self-soothing, I think so. And again, all kids may not have the skill to do it, so you have to work with your kid to, is music something you would help you? Taking a nap. Some people, when they're very stressed out, they take a nap and they're better like 3 hours later when they're out of the nap. That may work. Music, like driving with music, I find for myself, like going for a walk helps. And to me, like I know for the first half of the walk, I'm still upset, and the second half of the walk, I'm, feeling a lot better. So I think it is helpful. All of those are different skills to potentially develop. I think it would be good to like work with your kid, identify some on your own, suggest some things, and and also very important thing you said is not to try to have a discussion when both of you are upset. So when either party is upset, they need to take a break. I've told like moms or dads, like if you're upset and the kid is calm, you got to take the break. Take the break, because no positive outcome is going to be achieved when two people are upset or even one of them is upset. I think it needs to, if you want a resolution, you both need to be calm there. So I think
you can quote my children, and literally, if you sat any one of my children down and said, what does mom say when she's pissed off? Mm-hmm. And every one of my children will turn around and say, when my mom's angry, she tells me to leave her alone so that she doesn't say anything that's going to hurt or that I'm going to regret. And that's exactly, I tell that to my husband, my friends, my family. I say, I'm at that point where my volatile, vindictive self is raging to come through. I need you to give me time so that I can process and calm down, so that I don't say anything that's going to hurt or offend you. And I take that time because I know my capabilities. I know what happens when I get to that point where I don't care how I hurt you. That's my goal, right? And so I've learned that about myself, and I take that step back. We actually have a question. I don't know if this has been addressed, but what are some ways to get your child to be comfortable with talking about their emotions, especially preteens and teenagers? That is a really good question. Teenagers and preteens are, if you already haven't given them that safe space to connect with you and to open up to you, it does take longer. Number one thing I'm going to suggest, and I'll let Dr. Mishra do the same, is when you have a teenager, a preteen, if they're not comfortable opening up to you, you need to just keep letting them know and reassuring them that you're giving them what they need, that you're there to talk to them. And remember always, this is my biggest key. Don't judge what they're telling you. Don't react to what they're telling you. If they tell you something that you're not going to like, you need to control your reaction and say, okay, what do we do from here? And you need to remember that what they're going through and them opening up has nothing whatsoever to do with you. So your reaction is not warranted.
Right. I think, I agree. I think one, it takes time to develop that safe space. So if you've not actively developed it, I think it's not that it can still be done. If your child is in a lot of distress but shutting you out, I think it may not be the perfect time for you to be able to fully develop that relationship right then. You can start working on it, but it may not happen in the timely manner that you want. So I think at that point, I would suggest trying to get help externally, a counselor or a therapist who can start talking to the kid who has a confidential relationship with the child. So the child begins opening up. At the same time, I think presenting the option of opening up to that discussion is important. I think sometimes when we say you can talk to me about anything, as you said, we may, and I don't think we're judging them as people. We are just trying to also control our anxiety, because when we see here, my child is feeling sad every day, that causes us to feel anxious, and we are trying to find a solution. Oh, no, let's send you to this class, you'll feel better. So it's not that simple. It's not going to be resolved by just one intervention. I think it is helpful for them to feel like they can talk to you without you jumping to conclusions or judging them for it. Have a true open discussion where you are, actually hearing them. Now, by the way, when you're hearing this, you may actually develop a lot of anxiety of your own. When you're hearing this, now that discussion is not the place for you to resolve it with your child. When you're, if your child is dealing, you face it, and then I would suggest, I have told parents, because sometimes I've had parents whose kids may have very severe anxiety or depression, whose kids may have autism, whose kids may have other developmental issues, because of which it requires a lot of emotional and physical effort from the parent. I've suggested, you need to get your own help so you can keep providing your child the best that you can. So even if you are, frankly, I'll tell you, I'm in therapy right now, and I see my therapist once a week, and I'm a psychiatrist, so people, culturally people may say that, okay, I mean, you're an expert in this field, but I'm not an expert in my own mental health, or I need to get help for myself.
Never are.
So I think even I would say same thing deals with our kids. When we are trying to help them best, we want to make sure we're helping ourselves, as you said in the beginning. That is the key thing, because if we are ignoring ourselves, it is not going to allow us to do the best for somebody else,
So she further responded, Tori, hi Tori, and she said, my teenager started dating, and even though she knows she can talk to me about anything, I think she's afraid to tell me something and I can't get it out of her. Now, I have a big suggestion for that, and this depends on your comfort level. As my children got older, my oldest, who is 19 going on 20 this year, wouldn't talk to me about anything. Growing up, he wouldn't talk to me about anything. Now, at 19 years old, I've created that space, and we've created that space together where he will tell me everything, things that I don't even want to hear. He will tell me. But I also opened up to him. So if you have a child that's dating and just starting new experiences, start telling them about your experiences. Open up to them, and children forget, or they don't even realize that we were where they are. In some way, shape, or form, we were newly dating. And I'm going to go deeper. We did lose our virginity. We did do all of those things. We did try drugs. We did try drinking. We've been down that road. We need to connect with them and say, I do understand quite a bit where you are. It's okay to tell me these things. And again, control your emotions. Now, I wanted to touch on something you said, Dr. Mishra, about getting them help. One of the ways to do that, especially if they're not interested in that and they're very closed off, is suggest it in a way that it's their choice. Mm-hmm. Say, hey, do you want to work with, if you get them to watch a video like this, right? Mm-hmm. And you say, hey, would you like to work with somebody like Dr. Mishra or Melissa? Mm-hmm. You have options and opportunities. There's coaches like me. Mm-hmm. Make sure you do your research that coach knows what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do, because I just personal experience. I'm crazy mindset. I get it. And Dr. Mishra, you have psychiatry, you have psychology, you've got therapy and counseling. Mm-hmm. There are many different options to help children. Breathing. So that's another thing I wanted to touch on, breathing techniques. Mm-hmm. I always say to my own clients, and in half the videos I've done so far, is there's something called the 15-second breathing technique, or I think it's the box breathing. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it is so de-emotional. I love it. So I even do it myself, and it's count to 5 as you're inhaling, hold for 5, and then exhale on 5. Those 15 seconds, you have no idea how transformative that feels in your body. Yeah. And it lowers your emotions, which is what we want, right? You always want to be calming your emotions so that you can think logically, you can think outside the box, and you can think of different perspectives. Those are key when you're interacting with other people, especially children, is calming yourself down, thinking of it from their perspective, and helping them feel like they have a say in who they are and what they want.
Yeah, I mean, it's so empowering that if you can, if you have a tool that within 2 to 3 minutes of being in a high anxiety state, you can actually calm yourselves and be in control, feel like you're in control. But I think a lot of us struggle with the anxiety or depression piece because we feel out of control when we don't have that. And I think it's really a simple tool to feel in control. I think the other thing you were saying is, how do parents get help when somebody doesn't want to get help, if a child doesn't want to get help? I think keeping the avenues open, reminding them that there are avenues, some extent of self-revelation is helpful. I think the self-revelation piece, I think, is helpful, may not be like you would reveal to another adult, because I think we have always to remember that the emotional development of a kid is at their age level, it's not at your level. So the amount of self-revelation they can handle is different. So I think, and at different ages, they can handle different amount of it. So I think that is a young child can hear, oh, I was feeling sad, so I went to a therapist. That's fair for even a young child to hear, but they may not be able to handle how severe a depression it was. So I think that revelation at that age may not be appropriate. Whereas somebody who's a teenager who has severe depression, you may be able to share that I was struggling through very similar emotions, very depressed, and this is what helped me. So I think, so you have to judge as a parent amount of self-revelation that's helpful. If you don't know, even I think it's fair to even say that if you may not know how much is fair, how much is right. In that case, talking to a therapist maybe give you a good idea of how much to self-reveal to a particular child. But also, I think, asking for help, you can talk to the school teacher. You can have the school teacher recommend the child go to a counselor. You don't have to be the one referring. You can talk to the pediatrician who can refer the child to the counselor. So it can be, it's not, I don't think it's sneaky. I think it's just getting them help in the way they're ready to receive it. If it is not directly from you, there are many other people who you can engage to provide that.
Yeah. And we know that a lot of times when children have anxiety around their parents or that angst towards their parents, they're not going to listen to you the way that they would listen to somebody like us, who has that ability to say, hey, I know where you're at. I feel your pain. You're validated for feeling that way. Right. What do you want to do? Like, what do you want to say? What do you want to feel? What do you want to create? Right. And as adults, think about how empowered you feel when you actually feel like you're in control. So I'm going to promo for a second because, I can. Right. My statement for my business as an identity coach is I empower you to take out your trash. And that's all the stuff that's no longer making you happy. Take out your trash, reclaim your identity, who you are at your core, and take charge of your life so that you can start living it your way for yourself. That's what I do as an identity coach, because that is what I feel is the most important thing for people to learn. When you feel like you're in control of your emotions, your power, your actions, your reactions, that it changes everything. If you teach your kids how to be confident in who they are and what works for them, it changes their entire outlook on life.
Yeah. And I think, the other important lesson is for the kids to learn that they need to be their own strongest advocate. And that's something they learn only by, initially they see it, you being an advocate for them. So if your child is getting bullied, if your child is struggling with grades, if your child is struggling with behavior, if you are actually in the school talking to the teachers, working on a solution, the child is seeing that, somebody is really fighting for me here. And they're learning this. So as they get older, they understand, okay, being treated nicely or being provided the right educational setting is my right. And so they begin to advocate for themselves. And then you want them to be adults who are advocating for what they need. So I think that's another very important piece that kids learn by you starting to do it, and then they absorb it and make it a part of themselves.
especially if you're doing it for yourself.
Absolutely.
They learn by example, right? I'm a smoker, and I'm not going to deny it's a horrible habit, but I'm a smoker. How many I learned to smoke because my parents smoked and my grandparents smoked and my aunts and uncles smoked. Half my family were smokers.
Mm-hmm.
They learn from example. Mm-hmm. If we're standing up for ourselves and saying, I'm not taking that, that is not something I accept. That's not something I acknowledge. You don't get to treat me that way. Absolutely. And even if you're saying that to your children, right? You want me to treat you a certain way. You need to remember that I deserve to be treated the same way.
Absolutely.
And it's a mutual respect. Mm-hmm. I was taught by an old friend of mine. I was taught that my children doing chores in the house it's a responsibility because they're a part of a family unit. They live in the house. Mm-hmm. They use everything in the house. They are responsible mm-hmm. for their percentage of that house, for their mm-hmm. ability to take care of themselves and the things that they have, right? Teaching them responsibility. It's teaching them teamwork, coexistence.
Right. I mean, and also, what kind of world are we expecting them to live in? I mean,
that's a huge life lesson in this house.
Yeah, I mean, I think the world they're going to be living in is going to hold them accountable. I think if we are not teaching them that they're going to be held accountable, they're going to end up in college or work at 18 and realize they're suddenly being held accountable when they've never had. And trust me, like however strict or harsh you may be not harsh, but strict or stern you may be as a parent, the world is going to be a lot harder. I think if you feel bad about it, you may feel bad about it, but you still got to do the right thing for the child. They may not always agree with what you're doing, but I think you got to do it.
Yeah, there has to be a healthy balance. They have Absolutely. To feel like you are in control of your life.
Absolutely.
And until they're 18, for the most part, in control of theirs, as well as you need to remember to give them that freedom to make their mistakes. I know a lot of parents are completely opposite, and they don't allow their children to make the mistakes they need to learn to grow.
They will make their mistakes. Either they make it while they're in your home or they make it as adults. The mistakes are going to be made at some point in their life, So I think it's an important lesson to allow them to make it, help them know how to recover from it, how to mend relationships, all of that. Those are important lessons for them to get. And nobody else is as invested as you are as a parent for your kids, So I think
for sure
it's helpful to think about that. I think it really has to start with making sure you're doing okay, and because that's when you're going to be the best possible person to help them be okay.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's why I don't fight with people who say it, but I try to help people who say, that my kids are first. My children aren't first. I can't stress this enough. I love my children as much as any parent. I will go mama bear on your butt faster than you will blink. But at the same time, I'm first in my relationships. I'm number one because nobody else is going to put me number one. From the day I am born till the day I die, it's me. It's me. Your children need to understand that about themselves. From the day they're born until the day they die, it's them.
Mm-hmm.
They're responsible. They have rights. They have capabilities, and they need to learn how to do that. When my husband is second, because when my children grow up and they leave the nest, it's just going to be me and my husband, or my husband and I. Sorry, if he's watching, he'll correct me on that. It's just going to be my husband and I. And then if I focused on my children for the 18 years, where's that relationship gone? Right. The same goes for myself. If I focus on my husband and my children and my career for the next 30 years, when all of that is gone, where am I? You always have to know who you are, what you need to feel, where you want to be, because you are your greatest advocate. And putting your children before your own mental health shows them to put everybody else before their own.
Absolutely. I think, yeah. I think the, making sure you are taking care of yourself, taking care of your physical health, mental health is really key. As of course, and I think as a parent, it becomes important because that helps you take care of your kids better, but also you're setting the right example for them to take care of themselves as they get older. So I think it's really, really important to start with yourself on that.
Yeah. Not to say to go blame, as adults, don't go looking back and, blaming your parents for your choices, because that's not how it works. But as an adult, think about how you cope. When did you learn that? How did you learn that? Why did you learn that? If you have mental health, what created that mental health? And are you continuing the cycle of that mental health with your own kids?
Right.
That responsibility is on you, because you can stop those cycles.
Right. Absolutely. I think it is. I think there's more in our power than not in many cases. I think sometimes it's difficult to get out of that cycle you're in like if there's a long history of mental illness in the family and nobody wants to talk about it, nobody wants to address it, you can actually be maybe the first person who wants to address it for yourself. And I think it's a courageous step, but I think it's a necessary step for for all of us. Yeah,
absolutely. I completely agree. I have a very manipulative, very narcissistic family, and I chose to completely walk away. The choice was my choice and theirs, because they stopped talking to me as well. But I chose to be different. I chose to be the black sheep of the family. I chose to be the one who questioned whether it was okay to be treated a certain way. And I continued that, and I don't allow my children to do that. There is no manipulation. Oh, well, this person would do it for me. Well, then go ask that person. That was the big one in my family. So there is that family and generational situations or lessons or cycles, abuse, alcohol and drug abuse, that again comes down to mental health, right? And yeah, there's so many topics within this topic that I would love to highlight, but at the same time, this is all about putting yourself first, making sure that you're healthy, while also helping your children create those coping techniques and making sure they know who they are and feel like they can control and express who they are in a healthy way without judgment.
Right. And it's going to be a lot easier for you to deal with what they're sharing if you yourself are helping yourself. I think being in difficult situations, I think many people have it in common, but I think unless you can only change how you are dealing with that situation. That's the only thing you can change. You cannot change how others are acting. So the only way you can actually take ownership of what's happening is start addressing. If you need to get in therapy, get in treatment, you do that, and try to see how you can change things. Because we can blame people all the time, but we cannot change what they're doing. We cannot get them to always see the right way to do things. But you can maybe get away from that, or set better boundaries, or whatever that needs to happen.
Yeah. Perception. I'm constantly saying that your perception is completely different. You can go through, and I always say this, I've probably said this in a few videos already, and I'm going to repeat it because I can. It's great. You have identical twins who grow up in an abusive alcoholic household. You have identical experiences. One turns into a raging alcoholic. One never touches alcohol ever. Two completely different outcomes, two completely different perceptions or coping mechanisms of the same situation. So it is different. If my husband cheats on me, I can't say that I'm going to react or respond the way that somebody else would. It's completely different based on who you are, your identity, your coping skills, your thought processes. Your mentality accounts for 85% of your reality, because if you don't feel you're worth it, your life is going to portray that. If you don't feel like you are confident, your life's going to portray that. If you don't feel like you are deserving of a happy, healthy household, your life is going to portray that, and you're going to create those situations. So if you're not happy and healthy, are your children going to be happy and healthy? The way you respond to them, the way you talk to them, the way you interact with them, the way that you raise them is all going to be based on your level of belief, which is your emotions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a much harder road ahead if you're ignoring your own mental health. There's no question about that.
Yeah, very important. Well, since we are coming up to that time, is there anything else you'd like to add for our viewers or our listeners that you think is really important for them to, even just a recap from your side on this episode and how to really help our children's mental health?
Right. So I think the biggest thing I want to say is that, you don't have to have all the answers. There are experts, there are people in your network who would be good people to ask and consult if you don't know what to do. You can talk to your kid's pediatrician, you can talk to your own doctor, you can talk to a therapist, you can talk to the school teacher, you can talk to a counselor at school, express your concerns with them, and they can tell you what the next best step would be for you to try to address some of the concerns you have. Also, if you are struggling yourself, I would definitely say that start with that. I think get help for yourself. I think it'll make it a lot easier for you to address the needs of your child. So I would really encourage people to do that. And I think there are people in the community you're in who you can ask for help, and they can provide guidance. If you don't have to, again, do this by yourself. There is support out there, so please seek it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to say that there are support groups on Facebook. There's support groups in your communities. There's support groups everywhere, even if it isn't a mental health professional, even if it's a coach, even if it's another mother or another father who's in a similar situation to you, and you want different perspectives and you just want to feel like you aren't alone. Connect with people around you. Your support system is as little as or as large as you make it, because you get to decide who you work with, who you talk to, who you bring into your sphere. You have that control. So make sure that you are finding people who are there to help you and really care about what's going on in your life. Thank you so much, Dr. Mishra. I appreciate your time today. I think that this is one of my favorite episodes, one of my favorite topics. I think that kids need more advocacy, and parents definitely need to support their own mental health. And in order to do that, they need to learn what that means. So,
yeah, I had a great time. Thank you for this talk. I think I think there may be questions later, but I think I'd be happy to do this again on a specific topic if people have questions, and then we can connect.
Sure. I love that. Thank you. Okay. I will reach out to you because I do have another topic that you might be very helpful in. So
sounds good.
I'll leave that one for now to this episode. I hope that you found value in it. If you would like to be a co-host, if you would like to have a featured topic, or you'd like to sponsor a show, please reach out to me at justalivetv.com. If you would like to connect with Dr. Mishra or myself, our contact information is in the description of this video or podcast, wherever you're listening or watching. I would like to say thank you. I sponsored this episode because, again, my own family has struggled with mental health, has struggled with knowing how to be the best that we can be and put ourselves first. And I want anybody watching, if you feel like you would like to connect with me on this topic, please go to melissakretchler.com. I'm an identity coach, and I would love to talk to you and see if we are a right fit to help you Learn who you are and get rid of your trash. So lots of love. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you again, Dr. Mishra. And I will see everyone on the next episode.